I walked into my childhood home expecting birthday cake and warm hugs from family members I hadn't seen in months. Instead, I found 110 relatives packed into every available space, watching my mother methodically tear my photographs from the hallway walls. My father stood beside the dining table clutching a thick manila envelope, while my sister dangled my car keys like a trophy. In the far corner, my boss from Data Flow Solutions held what looked suspiciously like termination paperwork. The birthday decorations hung mockingly above this bizarre gathering, as complete silence filled rooms that should have been buzzing with celebration. This wasn't a party. I had arrived 30 minutes early, hoping to help arrange tables and chairs for what I believed would be the largest birthday celebration of my life. My parents, Robert and Patricia, had been secretive about the guest list for weeks, claiming they wanted to surprise me with the most memorable 28th birthday possible. Walking through the front door, I immediately sensed something wrong with the atmosphere. Cousins from 3 different states filled the living room, their conversations hushed and awkward. Aunts and uncles I recognized from childhood gatherings stood uncomfortably near the windows, avoiding direct eye contact. Great-aunts Dorothy and Margaret occupied the good sofa, whispering behind cupped hands. Even distant relatives from my father's side, people I hadn't spoken to since high school graduation, clustered around the kitchen island. My sister Emma approached with an expression I couldn't quite read. At 25, she typically greeted me with playful sarcasm and sibling rivalry, but today her demeanor carried an unfamiliar coldness. She wore her best black dress, the one reserved for formal occasions and job interviews. "Happy birthday, Chance," she said, her voice strangely flat. "Dad's been waiting to give you something special." I scanned the room for my girlfriend, Julia, who had confirmed her attendance 3 days earlier. Her absence struck me as particularly odd, since she had specifically asked about the start time and whether she should bring anything. Instead, I spotted Marcus, my direct supervisor at Data Flow Solutions, standing near the back patio door wearing a suit instead of his usual casual Friday attire. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I didn't know you knew my parents." He shifted uncomfortably, holding a folder against his chest. "Chance, we need to discuss some workplace matters. This seemed like an appropriate time." Before I could respond, my mother's voice cut through the ambient chatter. Patricia commanded attention from her position beside the hallway that led to the bedrooms where framed photographs chronicled my life from infancy through college graduation. "Everyone please gather around," she announced, her tone carrying an unusual formality. "We've brought you here today for a very specific purpose regarding our son." The relatives slowly formed a semicircle, creating an audience that made me increasingly uncomfortable. I noticed several people holding their phones, though, whether for pictures or something else remained unclear. Patricia began removing photographs from their hooks with deliberate precision. The first showed me in my high school cap and gown, beaming beside both parents after graduation. She set it face down on the nearby table without ceremony. Next came my college acceptance letter, framed and displayed prominently for 7 years. Down it went. "Mom, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. She ignored my question, continuing her methodical destruction of my visual history within their home. My first job promotion certificate joined the growing pile. A family vacation photo from 3 summers ago followed. Each removed image felt like a small erasure of my existence in this house. Robert stepped forward, the manila envelope now prominently displayed. His expression carried none of the warmth I associated with birthday celebrations or family gatherings. Instead, his face showed the stern disappointment typically reserved for serious disciplinary conversations. "Chance." He began, his voice carrying enough volume for the entire room to hear clearly. "This gathering serves a corrective purpose. You've violated fundamental family principles through your recent life choices. and there must be consequences. The envelope landed on the table with an audible thud thick enough to contain substantial documentation. Several relatives leaned forward, clearly understanding they were witnessing something unprecedented in our family dynamics. Inside this envelope, you'll find an itemized accounting of every dollar your mother and I have invested in your upbringing, education, and support over the past 28 years. Robert continued. The total comes to exactly $248,673. We expect full repayment within 72 hours. Gasps rippled through the assembled crowd. Great Aunt Dorothy audibly whispered, "Good Lord," while Cousin Brian shook his head in apparent disbelief. I stood frozen, unable to process the absurdity of what I was hearing. Emma produced a set of car keys from her purse, dangling them with obvious satisfaction. "Oh, and Dad already transferred the title of your Honda to me. Seemed fair since you've been so unwilling to help family members when they need financial support." The keys to my 2019 Honda Accord, purchased with my own money and carrying monthly payments I had never missed, now belonged to my sister, according to her casual announcement. I reached instinctively toward my pocket, where my own keys should have been finding it empty. Marcus cleared his throat, stepping forward with obvious reluctance. "Chance, I'm sorry to inform you that Dataflow Solutions is terminating your employment effective immediately. We received concerning information about potential code theft and ethical violations that require immediate action to protect company interests." The folder he'd been clutching contained official termination paperwork, complete with corporate letterhead and legal language about immediate cessation of all company access and benefits. My 3-year career at the software development firm, built through countless late nights and successful project completions, had apparently ended based on mysterious accusations I knew nothing about. "This is insane!" I managed to whisper, though my voice barely carried beyond the nearest relatives. Patricia retrieved a black garbage bag from behind the couch, its contents clanking with the sound of personal belongings. "Your remaining possessions from your childhood bedroom are in here. We've also contacted your landlord about the lease violation issues." She handed me the bag with the same emotional detachment she might show when taking out actual garbage. The weight suggested it contained perhaps a dozen small items, hardly representative of 18 years spent living in this house. "You have 72 hours to arrange payment for the amount specified in that envelope," Robert announced to the entire gathering. "If you cannot meet this obligation, you are no longer welcome to contact any member of this family. Ever." The room erupted in whispered conversations as relatives began processing the reality of what they were witnessing. Some appeared shocked by the harshness of the ultimatum, while others nodded in apparent approval of my parents' decisive action. I stood in the center of this surreal scene, holding a garbage bag of childhood memories, staring at an impossible bill for parental obligations I had never requested, learning about my sudden unemployment from my boss at what should have been my birthday party. The birthday decorations hanging above this nightmare scenario felt like a cruel joke, orchestrated by people I had trusted completely until this moment. My hands trembled as I opened the manila envelope, revealing page after page of meticulously documented expenses spanning my entire life. The itemization began with hospital costs from my birth and continued through elementary school lunch accounts, piano lessons from age 7, orthodontic treatments, summer camps, college tuition payments, and even birthday presents and Christmas gifts going back 20 years. Every family dinner, every vacation, every piece of clothing purchased before I earned my own income had been assigned a monetary value with calculated interest. They had documented grocery expenses attributed to my presence in the household utility costs for my bedroom and transportation fees for rides to school activities and friends' houses during my teenage years. Robert had included depreciation costs for furniture in my childhood bedroom, cleaning supplies used in my bathroom, and medical expenses for routine checkups and vaccinations. Even the family dog's veterinary bills included a percentage attributed to my interaction with the pet. The mathematical precision of this financial inventory revealed months or possibly years of preparation. As I studied the documentation, memories of recent conversations began forming a disturbing pattern. 3 weeks ago, I had refused to co-sign a business loan for Robert's construction company, explaining my concerns about the risky investment and my own financial obligations. His reaction had seemed disproportionately angry at the time, with accusations of selfishness and betrayal of family loyalty echoing through heated phone conversations. The argument had escalated when I discovered they had been secretly monitoring my bank accounts through old joint account authorizations from my college years. Confronting them about these privacy violations had triggered defensive responses and claims that parents maintained rights to oversee their children's financial decisions, regardless of age. Now I understood that conversation had been a test of my willingness to subordinate my judgment to their demands, and my refusal had initiated whatever plan culminated in tonight's public humiliation. Julia's absence suddenly made sense in this context. I tried calling her cell phone but received no response. Several relatives watched my failed attempt to reach my girlfriend with expressions ranging from sympathy to uncomfortable awareness of information I didn't possess. Marcus noticed my confusion and approached with obvious discomfort about his role in the evening's events. "Chance, I need to explain about the allegations we received. Someone submitted anonymous reports claiming you had stolen proprietary code and violated your employment agreement with outside consulting work. The accusations were completely fabricated, as I had never engaged in any unauthorized consulting or code sharing. My work at Dataflow focused on internal database management systems, with no external client interaction. The anonymous nature of the reports should have raised immediate red flags about their credibility. Who made these allegations? I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer. The reports came through multiple channels over the past 2 weeks, Marcus explained quietly. HR received emails, our legal department got phone calls, and even our CEO heard concerns from someone claiming to be a family member worried about potential liability issues. The systematic nature of the campaign against my professional reputation revealed coordination and planning that went far beyond impulsive family conflict. Someone had deliberately targeted my employment as part of a broader strategy to isolate and control me. Uncle Brian, my father's older brother and a retired attorney, had been listening to our conversation with growing alarm. He approached with the measured demeanor I remembered from childhood visits, when he would mediate disputes between siblings with calm, legal reasoning. "Chance, may I examine those documents?" he asked, gesturing toward the itemized bill. I handed him the envelope, while grateful for any sign of adult rationality in this surreal situation. Uncle Brian's expression grew increasingly troubled as he reviewed the financial calculations and legal language. "This is highly irregular," he murmured, adjusting his reading glasses. "Parents cannot legally demand reimbursement for child-rearing expenses. These obligations are voluntary and non-recoverable under any reasonable interpretation of family law." Several relatives gathered around Uncle Brian as he continued examining the documentation. Cousin Sarah, a nurse practitioner from Denver who had always maintained good relationships across family lines, began recording the proceedings on her smartphone, despite Patricia's sharp objections. "Sarah, put that phone away immediately," Patricia demanded. "This is a private family matter." "Actually, Aunt Patricia, this seems like something that should be documented," Sarah replied calmly. "Uncle Brian is right about the legal issues here. What you're demanding has no basis in law." Emma had been watching these developments with increasing agitation, finally approaching me with an expression that mixed guilt with defiance. "Chance, you need to understand that we've been planning this intervention for months. Your selfishness and refusal to support family members who need help has reached a breaking point." Her use of the word intervention suggested they viewed this public humiliation as therapeutic rather than punitive, a delusion that made their actions even more disturbing. The twisted psychology of people who convince themselves that cruelty serves healing purposes revealed depths of dysfunction I had never suspected in my own family. I tried calling Julia again this time, using Uncle Brian's phone to bypass any blocked numbers on her caller ID. She answered on the second ring, her voice strained and emotional. "Chance, I thought you were being arrested. Your mother called me 3 hours ago saying you were under federal investigation for computer fraud and that I should distance myself immediately to avoid being implicated. She said the FBI would probably contact me for questioning about our relationship." The phone nearly slipped from my hand as I processed this information. Patricia had preemptively poisoned my most important personal relationship with fabricated federal charges, ensuring that I would face this evening's ambush without emotional support from the person who mattered most to me. "Julia, none of that is true," I managed to say, though my voice sounded hollow even to myself. "I'm at my parents' house right now and they've completely lost their minds." "But your mother sounded so convincing, and she knew details about your job and finances that seemed too specific to be lies," Julia replied. "She even gave me the name of an FBI agent who was supposedly handling your case." The sophistication of their deception campaign revealed planning that extended far beyond family dynamics into criminal territory. They had researched enough legitimate details about federal investigation procedures to make their lies convincing to someone with no reason to doubt their basic honesty. Uncle Brian reclaimed his phone, immediately dialing his own attorney contacts, while Cousin Sarah continued recording despite increasing pressure from Patricia and Robert to stop documenting the proceedings. "David, I need an emergency consultation about a family situation involving potential fraud and harassment," Uncle Brian said into his phone. "Can you get to my brother's house within the hour? This situation requires immediate legal intervention." The atmosphere in the room shifted as relatives began choosing sides between supporting my parents' actions and expressing concern about their methods and legality. Great-Aunt Dorothy, the family matriarch whose opinions typically carried significant weight, shook her head with obvious disapproval. "Robert, Patricia, this behavior is beneath the dignity of our family name," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Whatever disagreements you have with Chance should be handled privately, not through public humiliation and financial extortion." Emma's response revealed the depth of her involvement in orchestrating this disaster. "Great-Aunt Dorothy, you don't understand what we've been dealing with. Chance has been selfish and ungrateful for years, and nothing else has gotten through to him." The desperation in Emma's voice suggested she genuinely believed their actions were justified, a psychological defense mechanism that allowed her to participate in cruelty while maintaining her self-image as a good person fighting for family unity. I stood in the middle of this chaos, holding my childhood possessions in a garbage bag, watching my family destroy itself through actions that crossed every boundary of reasonable behavior. The birthday that began with anticipation and excitement had transformed into a nightmare that challenged everything I believed about the people I had trusted most completely. The weight of multiple betrayals simultaneously devastating my personal relationships. Professional standing and family connections felt overwhelming. Yet part of me recognized that this moment of complete exposure might ultimately represent liberation from toxic dynamics I had never fully understood until they escalated beyond concealment. Emma's composure cracked as I confronted her about the systematic manipulation that had preceded this evening's ambush. Her involvement ran deeper than opportunistic support for our parents' actions, revealing months of deliberate sabotage motivated by her own financial desires and resentment over my refusal to fund her wedding expenses. "You want to know the truth?" she said, her voice rising with defensive anger. "I've been documenting your selfishness for 6 months, ever since you refused to loan me $15,000 for my wedding. What kind of brother abandons his sister's most important day because he's too greedy to help family?" The wedding loan request had occurred during a difficult financial period when I was managing student debt car payments and apartment expenses on my entry-level salary at Dataflow. My refusal had been purely practical rather than malicious, but Emma had apparently interpreted it as a personal attack requiring retaliation. Uncle Brian continued examining legal documents, while Cousin Sarah's phone camera captured increasingly damaging admissions from Emma about her role in destroying my reputation. Great Aunt Dorothy watched these developments with growing horror, occasionally muttering disapproving comments about the deterioration of family values. Emma explained to me how you gained access to information about Chance's employment and personal finances. Uncle Brian demanded with prosecutorial intensity. These allegations didn't create themselves. She glanced nervously between our parents and Uncle Brian before answering. I might have helped gather some information that supported the family's concerns about Chance's recent behavior and decision-making. Her careful phrasing couldn't disguise the reality of identity theft and privacy violations that would interest law enforcement officials. The anonymous reports submitted to Dataflow had required inside knowledge about my work assignments, project timelines, and company policies that Emma couldn't have obtained through casual conversation. Julia arrived 20 minutes after Uncle Brian's call, having driven directly from her apartment after realizing the extent of deception involved in Patricia's earlier phone call. Her presence provided emotional support, while also serving as another witness to the ongoing family disaster. Chance. I'm so sorry I believed those lies about federal charges, she said, embracing me while glaring at Patricia. Your mother was incredibly convincing, and she seemed to have legitimate details about legal procedures and investigation timelines. Patricia's ability to fabricate convincing federal investigation details suggested research and preparation that elevated her deception from impulsive cruelty to premeditated fraud. She had studied enough law enforcement procedures to make her lies believable to someone with no expertise in criminal justice processes. Robert's participation in this scheme became clearer as Uncle Brian questioned him about financial motivations behind their demand for reimbursement. The construction company loan that I had refused to co-sign represented only part of their desperate financial situation. Robert, are you facing bankruptcy proceedings? Uncle Brian asked directly. Is this entire situation motivated by your business failures rather than legitimate concerns about Chance's behavior? The question triggered defensive responses that revealed more information than Robert intended to share. His construction company owed significant money to suppliers and subcontractors, with several pending lawsuits threatening personal assets if the business couldn't meet its obligations. My refusal to co-sign their loan had eliminated their most viable option for obtaining additional credit, since banks had already declined their applications based on poor credit history and insufficient collateral. They needed someone with clean credit and steady income to guarantee debt that they almost certainly couldn't repay. Marcus approached me privately while the family arguments continued around us, offering information about Dataflow's internal investigation into the anonymous allegations against me. His discomfort about participating in this evening's events had grown as he witnessed the true nature of family dynamics involved. Chance, I need to tell you something about those reports we received, he said quietly. Our IT department tracked some of the emails to accounts that were created specifically to send those messages. Someone went to considerable trouble to make the allegations appear legitimate. The technical sophistication required to create convincing anonymous reports indicated planning that went beyond Emma's capabilities alone. Patricia and Robert had likely coordinated with her to ensure their campaign against my professional reputation appeared credible to corporate investigators. Uncle Brian's attorney friend, David, arrived exactly 1 hour after being contacted, immediately assessing the situation with professional detachment that contrasted sharply with the emotional chaos surrounding him. His presence transformed the gathering from a family dispute into potential criminal evidence collection. I need everyone to remain calm while I document what's occurred here tonight, David announced. Several of the actions described to me over the phone constitute serious legal violations that require proper handling. Emma's panic became visible as she realized that her participation in identity theft and fraud could result in criminal charges, rather than simple family disapproval. She attempted to minimize her involvement while simultaneously defending the family's right to demand financial support from ungrateful children. The twisted logic of people who justify criminal behavior through claims of moral superiority revealed psychological dysfunction that had probably existed in our family dynamics for years without my recognition. I had attributed their controlling tendencies to excessive parental concern rather than understanding them as early warning signs of more serious problems. Patricia's breakdown began when David started asking specific questions about her phone call to Julia and the fabricated federal investigation claims. Her sophisticated deception required knowledge of actual FBI procedures that she couldn't have obtained through casual research. "Where did you get information about federal investigation protocols?" David asked, with legal precision. "Did you consult with law enforcement officials before making these claims? Or did you fabricate details designed to make your lies more convincing?" The question exposed the premeditated nature of her deception, while also raising questions about potential obstruction of justice if she had falsely claimed federal involvement in non-existent criminal proceedings. Robert attempted to defend their actions by claiming parental rights to control adult children's financial decisions, an argument that David immediately dismantled with references to actual legal precedents and constitutional protections. "Parents have no legal authority to demand reimbursement for child-rearing expenses," David explained to the assembled relatives. "What you're describing constitutes extortion, and the methods used to isolate Chance from employment and personal relationships involve multiple felony violations." The room fell silent as relatives processed the legal implications of what they had witnessed. Supporting my parents' actions could potentially make them accessories to criminal behavior, while opposing them might fracture family relationships that had existed for decades. Great-Aunt Dorothy broke the silence with moral authority that commanded attention from all generations present. "Robert and Patricia, you have disgraced our family name through behavior that violates every principle of decency and respect we tried to instill in our children. This ends now before you destroy relationships that can never be repaired." Her condemnation carried weight that seemed to penetrate even Patricia's defensive delusions, though Robert continued maintaining that their actions represented necessary intervention rather than criminal harassment. The birthday celebration that had begun with anticipation and family togetherness was transforming into a crime scene investigation that would determine whether my parents faced prosecution for their systematic campaign of fraud, identity theft, and emotional abuse disguised as parental concern. I stood surrounded by evidence of betrayal that extended far beyond financial demands into coordinated destruction of my professional reputation, personal relationships, and psychological well-being through methods that required months of planning and research to execute effectively. Uncle Brian's attorney consultation transformed scattered family opposition into organized resistance against Robert and Patricia's actions. David's professional assessment legitimized concerns that several relatives had been afraid to express, creating space for more family members to voice their discomfort with the evening's proceedings. Great-Aunt Dorothy took charge of coordinating family response with the authority that comes from being the eldest surviving member of Robert's generation. Her disapproval carried weight that younger relatives couldn't ignore, and her clear condemnation of my parents' behavior gave others permission to express similar sentiments. In 67 years of family gatherings, I have never witnessed such deliberately cruel and destructive behavior toward a family member. Dorothy announced to the entire room, "Robert and Patricia have violated every principle of love, respect, and basic human decency that our parents tried to teach us." Cousin Sarah continued recording despite increasing pressure from Patricia to stop documenting evidence that could be used in legal proceedings. Her nursing background had taught her to recognize abusive behavior patterns, and she understood the importance of preserving evidence for potential law enforcement involvement. "Aunt Patricia, this isn't family discipline," Sarah said firmly while maintaining her camera angle. "What you and Uncle Robert are doing tonight constitutes harassment, fraud, and possibly criminal conspiracy. Every family member present needs to understand they're witnessing potentially illegal activity." Julia's arrival provided crucial testimony about Patricia's elaborate deception regarding fabricated federal charges. Her account of the phone conversation revealed sophisticated knowledge of law enforcement procedures that Patricia couldn't have obtained through casual research. She gave me specific details about FBI investigation timelines, evidence collection procedures, and even the name of an agent who was supposedly handling Chance's case. Julia explained to David and Uncle Brian. Everything sounded completely legitimate until I started asking follow-up questions that she couldn't answer. Marcus privately approached David with information about Dataflow's internal investigation into the anonymous allegations against me. His willingness to cooperate with legal authorities demonstrated corporate concern about becoming unwitting participants in what appeared to be an elaborate harassment campaign. Our IT security team identified several irregularities in the reports we received, Marcus explained. The emails came from newly created accounts using sophisticated anonymization techniques that suggest technical knowledge beyond casual computer use. David's documentation process revealed the scope of coordinated activity required to execute such a comprehensive attack on my personal and professional life. The timeline suggested months of planning, with multiple family members contributing information and resources to ensure maximum damage to my reputation and stability. Uncle Brian's investigation into financial matters uncovered additional disturbing information about Robert's business practices and the actual extent of their economic desperation. The construction company's problems ran deeper than simple cash flow issues, involving potential fraud and misrepresentation to clients and suppliers. "Robert, I've been reviewing public records about your business operations," Uncle Brian announced. "There are several concerning patterns that suggest problems beyond normal economic difficulties." The questioning revealed that Robert had been operating his construction company while knowing it couldn't meet existing obligations, continuing to accept new contracts and deposits from clients, despite inability to complete promised work. This pattern constituted fraud under Colorado business regulations. Patricia's emotional state deteriorated as she realized that their carefully planned evening of control and dominance was backfiring catastrophically. Family members who were supposed to support their parental authority were instead questioning their methods and motivations. "You're all taking his side because you don't understand what we've been dealing with," Patricia said, her voice becoming increasingly shrill. "Chance has been selfish and ungrateful for years, and nothing else has gotten through to him." Her justification revealed psychological mechanisms that allowed her to rationalize criminal behavior as therapeutic intervention, a delusion that made her actions more disturbing rather than less culpable for their consequences. Emma's panic intensified as she understood that her participation in identity theft and fraud could result in criminal charges that would destroy her wedding plans and professional nursing career. Her attempts to minimize involvement while maintaining family loyalty created contradictory statements that further damaged her credibility. David began organizing witness statements and evidence collection while explaining potential criminal charges that could result from the evening's activities. His legal analysis made clear that multiple felonies had been committed with sufficient evidence for successful prosecution. Identity theft, fraud, harassment, and possibly conspiracy charges are all supported by the evidence we've documented tonight. David explained to the assembled relatives. Anyone who participated in or facilitated these activities could face serious legal consequences. The threat of criminal prosecution created immediate fractures in family alliances as relatives began distancing themselves from Robert, Patricia, and Emma's actions. Several people who had initially supported parental authority started expressing concerns about legal liability for their own participation. Cousin Brian, a high school principal with experience in conflict resolution, attempted to mediate between opposing family factions while supporting legal intervention to prevent further escalation of the situation. This family gathering has revealed problems that require professional intervention rather than continued argument, Brian announced diplomatically. We need to focus on preventing additional harm while ensuring appropriate consequences for illegal behavior. Great-Aunt Dorothy's moral authority continued providing foundation for family opposition to my parents' actions, with her clear condemnation encouraging younger relatives to express their own concerns about witnessing potentially criminal behavior. Robert and Patricia's actions tonight have created legal liability for every person in this room, Dorothy stated with conviction. We cannot support or enable behavior that violates basic principles of law and human decency. David's presence had transformed the evening from family drama into criminal evidence collection, with proper documentation procedures and witness interviews replacing emotional arguments and personal accusations. Julia's support provided emotional stability, while I processed the reality that people I had trusted completely had spent months planning my systematic destruction through methods that required criminal activity to execute effectively. Uncle Brian's legal background and family position made him the natural leader of resistance against Robert and Patricia's actions, coordinating with David to ensure proper evidence preservation and witness protection for relatives willing to testify about what they had witnessed. The birthday celebration intended to force my submission through public humiliation had instead created a coalition of family members committed to exposing and stopping their criminal behavior through legal channels rather than family pressure. David's systematic documentation process revealed the full scope of criminal activity that had preceded this evening's confrontation. His legal training enabled him to identify evidence patterns that casual observers might miss, organizing testimony and physical proof into categories that would support prosecution under multiple statutes. Cousin Sarah's video recordings provided crucial evidence of admissions and confessions that Robert, Patricia, and Emma had made during heated exchanges with other family members. Her nursing background had taught her to remain calm under pressure, while accurately documenting events that others might forget or misremember. I've captured at least 30 minutes of direct statements about identity theft fraud and conspiracy to commit harassment, Sarah reported to David. Emma specifically admitted to accessing Chance's personal accounts and providing information to employers without authorization. Uncle Brian's investigation into the inheritance theft expanded as he contacted additional family members who might have information about financial irregularities involving my grandfather's estate. The timeline suggested systematic theft spanning 3 years with sophisticated methods to conceal the missing funds. Julia provided screenshots and voice message recordings that documented Patricia's elaborate deception about fabricated federal charges. The evidence demonstrated premeditation and research into actual law enforcement procedures to make the lies more convincing to someone with no expertise in criminal justice. Your mother researched FBI investigation protocols extensively before calling me, Julia explained to David. She knew specific terminology and procedural details that required significant preparation to obtain and present convincingly. Marcus offered to provide Dataflow's internal investigation findings about the anonymous allegations against me, including technical analysis that identified sophisticated methods used to create multiple fake identities for submitting fraudulent reports. Our IT security team determined that someone used advanced anonymization techniques and created multiple email accounts specifically to make these false allegations appear legitimate, Marcus explained. This level of technical sophistication suggests planning and expertise beyond casual computer use. Robert's attempts to defend their actions became increasingly desperate as evidence mounted against him, Patricia and Emma. His claims about parental authority and family loyalty couldn't withstand David's legal analysis of actual statutory violations their behavior had created. Robert demanding payment for parental obligations constitutes extortion under Colorado state law. David explained with professional precision. The methods used to isolate chance from employment and personal relationships involve identity theft fraud and conspiracy charges that carry significant prison sentences. Patricia's emotional breakdown accelerated as she realized that their carefully orchestrated plan had created legal jeopardy rather than achieving the family control they had intended. Her sophisticated deception about federal investigations could result in obstruction of justice charges in addition to fraud and harassment violations. Great-Aunt Dorothy's testimony provided historical context about family financial relationships that supported accusations of inheritance theft. Her memory of my grandfather's intentions regarding the trust fund contradicted Robert's claims about legitimate access to those funds. Your grandfather specifically established that trust fund for Chance's education and early career expenses, Dorothy testified. Robert had no legal authority to access those funds for business purposes, regardless of family financial pressures. Emma's confession about accessing my email accounts for months provided evidence of identity theft and privacy violations that exceeded simple family disagreement into criminal territory. Her admission revealed systematic surveillance that had enabled their coordinated attack on my reputation. I was trying to help my parents understand what kind of person Chance had become, Emma said defensively. Reading his emails and monitoring his financial accounts seemed like reasonable family oversight. David's legal analysis made clear that Emma's family oversight constituted multiple felony violations, regardless of her stated motivations, with sufficient evidence to support successful prosecution under state and federal privacy laws. Uncle Brian's financial investigation uncovered bank records showing that Robert had been systematically transferring money from my inheritance account to cover business debts and personal expenses. The theft totaled $67,000 over 36 months with detailed transaction records that would support criminal prosecution. Robert has been stealing from Chance's inheritance since shortly after their grandfather's death, Uncle Brian announced to the assembled relatives. The evidence shows deliberate and systematic theft designed to conceal the missing funds until they could force Chance to co-sign business loans. The revelation that my parents had been stealing my inheritance while simultaneously demanding that I support their failing business demonstrated levels of financial fraud and family betrayal that shocked even relatives who had supported their initial actions. David began contacting law enforcement officials about the evidence collected during the evening, explaining that multiple felonies had been documented with sufficient witness testimony to support prosecution under state and federal statutes. The scope of criminal activity we've documented tonight requires immediate law enforcement intervention, David announced. Identity theft, inheritance fraud, and conspiracy charges are all supported by substantial evidence with multiple witnesses. Patricia's final breakdown occurred when she realized that criminal prosecution was imminent rather than theoretical, with evidence sufficient to ensure conviction on multiple charges that could result in significant prison sentences for herself, Robert, and Emma. This was supposed to teach Chance about family responsibility, Patricia sobbed. We never intended for this to become a criminal investigation. Her claim about innocent intentions couldn't mitigate the evidence of months of planning and sophisticated criminal activity required to execute their systematic attack on my personal and professional life. Cousin Sarah continued documenting confessions and admissions that strengthened the case for criminal prosecution, while Julia provided additional evidence about the extent of deception involved in isolating me from emotional support during their planned ambush. Uncle Brian's coordination with David ensured proper preservation of evidence and witness testimony that would support prosecution under multiple criminal statutes, transforming a family gathering into comprehensive documentation of criminal conspiracy and fraud. The birthday celebration intended to force my submission had instead created irrefutable evidence of criminal activity that would result in serious legal consequences for people who had justified their behavior through claims of parental authority and family unity. Detective Maria Rodriguez arrived 43 minutes after David's emergency call to law enforcement, immediately transforming our family gathering into an active crime scene investigation. Her professional demeanor contrasted sharply with the emotional chaos that had dominated the evening, bringing official authority that commanded respect from all family members present. "I need everyone to remain seated while I assess the situation and collect preliminary statements." Detective Rodriguez announced her badge and uniform, establishing immediate control over proceedings that had spiraled beyond family dispute into documented criminal activity. Robert attempted to leave through the back patio door, but encountered Uncle Brian blocking his exit with calm determination. The physical confrontation that might have resulted was prevented by Detective Rodriguez's intervention, though Robert's flight attempt provided additional evidence of consciousness of guilt. "Sir, I need you to return to your seat." Detective Rodriguez directed Robert with professional firmness. "Attempting to leave during an active investigation raises additional concerns about your cooperation with law enforcement." Patricia's emotional state deteriorated further as she realized that criminal prosecution was no longer theoretical, but immediate reality, with a detective documenting evidence and witness statements that could result in formal charges within hours rather than weeks. Emma offered desperate concessions in attempts to avoid criminal liability for her role in identity theft and fraud, suggesting she could reverse car title transfers and withdraw false allegations if criminal charges could be avoided through family mediation. "Detective, I can fix everything I did," Emma pleaded. "The car title transfer can be reversed, and I can contact Dataflow to explain that the allegations were based on misunderstandings rather than actual evidence." Her offers to fix criminal violations demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of legal processes, since identity theft and fraud charges depend on actions taken rather than outcomes achieved or subsequently modified. Detective Rodriguez reviewed Cousin Sarah's video evidence and Uncle Brian's financial documentation while conducting preliminary interviews with family members who had witnessed the evening's events. Her systematic approach ensured proper evidence collection procedures that would support prosecution in criminal court. Dataflow's CEO personally called my cell phone during the detective's investigation, having received Marcus's report about corporate involvement in what appeared to be an elaborate harassment campaign targeting an employee through fraudulent allegations. Chance. "I want to personally apologize for Dataflow's role in this situation." CEO Jennifer Walsh said during a conversation that Detective Rodriguez requested be conducted on speakerphone for documentation purposes. "We're immediately reversing your termination and implementing a comprehensive review of our internal investigation procedures." The corporate response demonstrated Dataflow's concern about potential legal liability for participating in harassment based on fraudulent reports, with immediate remediation efforts designed to limit damage to both my reputation and their corporate standing. Uncle Brian's legal team initiated emergency proceedings to freeze Robert and Patricia's assets, pending recovery of stolen inheritance funds, with court documents that would prevent them from hiding or transferring money before criminal prosecution concluded. "We're seeking immediate asset preservation orders to ensure Chance can recover his stolen inheritance, plus accumulated interest and damages," Uncle Brian explained to Detective Rodriguez. "The evidence supports claims for both criminal prosecution and civil recovery." Detective Rodriguez's investigation expanded as additional family members shared information about Robert and Patricia's manipulation tactics that extended beyond the evening's immediate victims to include financial pressure and emotional blackmail, targeting multiple relatives over several years. Great-Aunt Dorothy provided testimony about decades of controlling behavior that had escalated gradually until tonight's criminal activity represented the culmination of long-standing patterns rather than isolated family disagreement. "Robert and Patricia have been manipulating family members through financial pressure and emotional guilt for at least 20 years, Dorothy testified. "Tonight's behavior represents escalation of existing problems rather than sudden personality changes. Emma's cooperation with Detective Rodriguez revealed additional details about the coordination required to execute systematic destruction of my reputation, including technical assistance from Robert's construction company employees, who had computer skills beyond her nursing background. My dad's office manager helped set up the anonymous email accounts and taught me how to make the reports look legitimate. Emma admitted during questioning. She said it was like a pranking situation that would teach Chance about family loyalty. The involvement of Robert's employees in criminal conspiracy expanded the potential charges and demonstrated that their harassment campaign had extended beyond family members into criminal enterprise that could face federal prosecution under organized crime statutes. Detective Rodriguez placed Robert and Patricia under arrest for multiple felony charges, including identity theft, fraud, inheritance theft, and conspiracy to commit harassment. The formal arrest procedures marked the definitive end of their control over family dynamics and the beginning of criminal justice processes. Emma faced potential charges for identity theft and fraud, though her cooperation with investigators and willingness to provide testimony against Robert and Patricia might result in reduced charges in exchange for her assistance in building stronger cases against the primary conspirators. Marcus provided Dataflow's complete file on the fraudulent allegations, including technical analysis that identified sophisticated methods used to create convincing false reports about my supposed code theft and ethical violations. Julia documented the full scope of Patricia's deception about fabricated federal charges, providing evidence that demonstrated premeditation and research into actual law enforcement procedures to make lies more convincing to someone with no expertise in criminal justice. Uncle Brian's coordination with David ensured proper legal representation for criminal prosecution, while simultaneously pursuing civil recovery of stolen inheritance funds and damages for professional reputation harm caused by fraudulent allegations. Detective Rodriguez's evidence collection transformed scattered documentation into comprehensive criminal case files that would support prosecution under state and federal statutes, ensuring accountability for criminal behavior that had been disguised as family discipline. The birthday gathering that began with my expectation of celebration had concluded with criminal arrests, evidence preservation, and legal proceedings that would ensure justice for systematic betrayal and harassment orchestrated by people I had trusted completely until their criminal behavior became undeniable. 4 days after my arrest-filled birthday party, my cell phone buzzed constantly with calls from the county detention center where Robert and Patricia awaited arraignment on multiple felony charges. 53 missed calls over 2 days created a digital record of their desperation as the reality of criminal prosecution replaced their previous confidence about family authority and parental control. Emma's calls came from her apartment where she faced potential charges for identity theft and fraud, while simultaneously dealing with wedding cancellation costs and the collapse of her nursing career prospects. Her messages alternated between tearful apologies and angry accusations that I was destroying the family by cooperating with law enforcement instead of accepting their authority. Uncle Brian had become my unofficial guardian for legal matters, coordinating with David to manage both criminal prosecution and civil recovery proceedings. His law office conference room became our headquarters for organizing evidence and planning strategies that would ensure complete accountability for the systematic campaign against my reputation and stability. The district attorney's office is pursuing charges under both state and federal statutes, David explained during our morning meeting. Identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges carry significant prison sentences, especially with the evidence we've documented. Julia and I spent hours rebuilding trust and communication that Patricia's elaborate deception had temporarily damaged. Her support during the investigation demonstrated commitment to our relationship that survived even sophisticated manipulation designed to isolate me from emotional support during their planned ambush. I should have questioned those federal investigation claims more carefully, Julia said as we reviewed the timeline of deception. But your mother was so convincing, and she seemed to have legitimate details about law enforcement procedures. Dataflow's response exceeded my expectations for corporate accountability and reputation repair. CEO Jennifer Walsh implemented comprehensive policy changes to prevent future harassment campaigns, while offering promotion opportunities that recognized both my technical skills and resilience during the crisis. Marcus had become a close friend through shared experience of being manipulated by Robert and Patricia's fraudulent allegations. His testimony would be crucial for federal charges related to interstate wire fraud, since the false reports had crossed state lines through Dataflow's multi-state corporate structure. Our IT security team identified the technical sophistication required to create those anonymous reports, Marcus explained. Someone with advanced computer skills helped coordinate the campaign, which supports federal conspiracy charges. The inheritance recovery process moved quickly once Uncle Brian's legal team obtained court orders freezing Robert and Patricia's assets. Bank records revealed not only the $67,000 stolen from my grandfather's trust, but additional irregularities suggesting broader financial misconduct. We've identified $95,000 in recoverable funds, plus 3 years of accumulated interest, Uncle Brian reported. The civil case will also seek damages for professional reputation harm and emotional distress. Robert and Patricia's plea bargain negotiations revealed the extent of their financial desperation and the calculated nature of their attack on my independence. The construction company's bankruptcy proceedings exposed fraudulent business practices that had victimized multiple clients and suppliers. They were facing personal bankruptcy and potential criminal charges for business fraud even before this family situation escalated, David explained. Forcing you to co-sign business loans was their attempt to avoid accountability for existing financial crimes. Emma's cooperation with prosecutors provided detailed testimony about the planning and coordination required to execute their systematic harassment campaign. Her nursing career prospects improved slightly through plea agreement terms that emphasized rehabilitation over punishment. Emma will serve community service and probation while attending counseling for family relationship issues, David reported. Her cooperation helped build stronger cases against Robert and Patricia, who were the primary conspirators. Great-Aunt Dorothy organized a genuine birthday celebration 3 weeks after the criminal arrests, establishing new family traditions that excluded Robert and Patricia while celebrating relationships built on respect and mutual support rather than control and manipulation. This family has survived worse problems than Robert and Patricia's criminal behavior, Dorothy announced during the replacement celebration. We'll rebuild relationships based on love and respect rather than fear and financial pressure. Dataflow's promotion to senior developer included a 40% salary increase and recognition for my resilience during the harassment campaign. The company's public support helped repair professional reputation damage caused by fraudulent allegations while demonstrating corporate commitment to employee protection. Julia and I announced our engagement during Uncle Brian's family barbecue surrounded by relatives who had supported us during the crisis and demonstrated genuine care for our happiness rather than demanding financial support or emotional submission. This experience taught us both about the difference between people who claim to love you and people who actually demonstrate love through their actions, Julia said during our engagement announcement. The legal proceedings concluded with Robert and Patricia accepting plea agreements that included full financial restitution, 3 years of probation, and mandatory counseling for family relationship issues. Their criminal records would prevent future attempts at financial manipulation or professional sabotage. Uncle Brian's guidance helped me understand that true family consists of people who support your growth and independence rather than demanding submission to their control. The crisis revealed relationships worth preserving while eliminating toxic dynamics that had limited my emotional development. 6 months later, Julia and I began planning our wedding with support from family members who celebrated our happiness rather than viewing our success as threats to their authority. The experience had strengthened our relationship through shared adversity while teaching valuable lessons about recognizing manipulation. My grandfather's inheritance fully recovered with interest, and damages provided financial security that enabled long-term planning without concern about family manipulation or emergency demands for support of other people's poor financial decisions. The birthday that began as my worst nightmare became the catalyst for the best year of my life, eliminating toxic relationships while strengthening connections with people who demonstrated genuine care through their actions during our crisis. Looking back, I realized that Robert and Patricia's criminal behavior had actually liberated me from psychological manipulation that had limited my independence and self-confidence for years without my conscious recognition of their controlling tactics. The experience taught me to trust my own judgment about people's motivations, rather than assuming that family relationships automatically deserve loyalty regardless of behavior patterns that violate basic respect and human decency. Most importantly, I learned that standing up for personal dignity and demanding accountability from people who claim to love you represents strength rather than disloyalty, even when the consequences include dramatic changes in family relationships. The legal system provided justice, while counseling helped me understand family dynamics that had normalized manipulation and control as expressions of care, rather than recognizing them as early warning signs of more serious psychological problems. Today, Julia and I live together with Uncle Brian and Great-Aunt Dorothy, serving as chosen family members who demonstrate genuine support without demanding submission or financial compensation for their love and guidance. The birthday disaster that destroyed my relationship with Robert, Patricia, and Emma ultimately revealed the difference between people who use love as a weapon for control and people who offer love as a foundation for growth and independence. Have you ever experienced family manipulation disguised as love and care? How did you recognize the difference between genuine support and controlling behavior? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with your own experiences, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family drama and finding genuine relationships. Share this with anyone who might be dealing with similar family manipulation. Sometimes hearing other people's stories helps us recognize patterns in our own lives. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve relationships built on respect and genuine care, rather than fear and obligation.